Hello there and welcome to your daily painting show, The Daily Yupari. I am Yupari, and in today's episode we are going to be mixing up some color with this. And this is my palette knife. It's fairly used up. It's a palette knife from who knows when and from who knows where. If you can figure out where this palette knife came from, please let me know. I've had this palette knife for so long. I think I got it when I started painting back in like, I don't know, 2000, late 2009, 2010 or whatever. So let's start mixing up some color with this, shall we? And I think that the first color that I'm going to want to mix up is the background. Now the paint, believe it or not, is still wet. So this is still the first color pass for me. So I think this is like the fourth episode now that I've filmed, you know, like creating the eyes, the big planes of the face, the nose, and then the mouth. And so now, after today's episode, I think we're going to let it dry, set it aside for a little while. So a couple days for this to dry, but for you, it'll just be one day. So the background, I think I'm going to use a little bit of the Peryline Red, some of the Alizarin. So let's mix up this color here. So I think that the palette knife, or in particular the palette, is definitely going to be the star of the show today. So I'm going to try to show you much more paint mixing. So again, this is how you do it. Just get a little bit, a swab of one, the other, and then whichever. So all of the reds, so scrape like this, scrape, 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 down, 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 dab, dab, dab. So mix, 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 scrape, 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 dab, 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 blend, blend, blend. So that's how we're going to mix the color. Now that I see this color, you know, it's a very nice and rich color, but I think it needs to be a little dulled down. So let's use the Dioxazine. You know, we haven't used Dioxazine that much yet. So let's use the Dioxazine purple. And again, if you're new to this channel and you want to know exactly what colors I'm using, I'm not going to read out the entire color palette right now just because, you know, it's going to take a long time. So Peryline Red, Alizarin Permanent, Dioxazine. I think it got too dark, but I will be reading out the colors to you as the painting unfolds, so don't worry. So a little bit of the Cadmium Red just to bring up the intensity. And once I get the color that I want for that background, so remember, scrape, 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 dab, 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 mix. Say it with me now. Scrape, 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 dab, 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 mix. Scrape, 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 dab, 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 mix. And there we go. Now we have the background color. I'm pretty sure that this is the color I'm going to want to use. But rather than apply the paint directly with the palette knife, I think what I'm going to do is clean off a brush and then use a brush to do that. So the palette knife is actually the easiest one to clean. See that? Just swipe and then you're done. So I'm going to clean off this brush, which is actually the one I use for the background already. But I want a much more precise mixture now. And while we're at it, we still have a few more post-it notes here. So yeah, let's get the post-it notes, because it's actually going to pertain to what we're going to do today. And again, you don't have to do anything fancy to get a post-it note. Just leave a comment in the most recent video, because I will be going over all of the comments, you know, every 4 days or so. So here is one of the post-it notes, which was, I read the post-it, sorry, I don't read the post-it. I read the comment, I study it, I analyze it, and then I paraphrase it as it pertains to the video. So Chris Pickstock, I think, Chris Pickstock, I'm trying to pronounce your name properly, but yeah, I'm doing my best I can. So just paraphrasing it, you actually said it very nicely. You said don't paint the holes. So let's look at the photo reference. So let's see here. The photo reference, you're seeing the holes in the model's clothing that I didn't actually paint in the underpainting stage. Now, someone else had the same idea, but I'm not going to write their name because, yeah, I'm going to try to share these with you. What's up with that? Somebody wrote lousy outfit for a portrait. So whenever I get one of these, I'm not going to put your name down because I don't want to shame anyone. So yeah, rather than say it's a lousy outfit for a portrait, maybe it's just not the portrait or not the outfit for that particular portrait. I don't know, but it's okay. I really appreciate all of your input regardless, because it seems that the majority of you do not want me to put those the holes for the sweater. I don't know what kind of design that is for the sweater, but yeah, we'll leave those out when we get into the sweater. And remember, the photo reference is just there for reference. That's all it is. So I'm going to use my medium, the Neo McGilp, mix right into this color, and let's see here what this color looks like. And I think it's just way too saturated. So let's return to the palette knife mixing. Now remember, the palette is going to be the star of today's episode. So in order to combat that the heat from this color, I'm going to use the Cobalt Teal. I was going to jump into the, let's take some of it off. I was going to use the burnt umber just kind of automatically, but nah. Let's try to use another pigment to bring down the heat from that color. A little bit more. So remember, scrape, 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 dab, 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 mix. That's how you use the palette knife. Scrape, 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 dab, 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 mix. Alright, so let's see how this color does now. Now let's put that the paint onto the brush. Let's see here. Just testing it out on one corner. So it's actually working quite nicely. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of making crisscross marks. Letting the brush strokes go in any which direction here. Just crisscross brush strokes. And this is actually a very classical thing to do, just to kind of let the background, or should I say the underpainting, show through, which this is actually you know what, I should cover that red that I put in before. But oh well, you know, we're not trying to copy the photo reference. Remember, the photo reference is just a reference. Alright, so now this is actually going to lead up to the next post-it note. So I'm going to show you the post-it note and fill in the painting or the background. So here is the post-it note. It is by Ramo, R-A-M-O. So this was again a comment that I read from one of my videos. I wrote it down. Well, I looked at it, I read it, I studied it, and I paraphrased it. So I'll talk about that as I fill in this background color and letting the brush strokes go in every which way, whichever way I feel. But okay, so now it would be kind of interesting actually to do an alizarin crimson underpainting. Now I know someone out there is screaming, use alizarin permanent! You must use alizarin permanent. Yeah, I could. Would it be the same? Probably. Remember, what everyone is saying is that alizarin, just softening that edge, alizarin crimson on its own, alizarin crimson is seen as a fugitive color. That is, it tends to fade over time. And you know, I don't know if I'm going to live long enough to see that color fade. Maybe it fades faster, or I don't know. But I hear that alizarin crimson is a color that tends to fade pretty quickly. So I'll probably, if I do that, I'll probably use the alizarin crimson permanent. And that being said, now I think we have the background all covered. So now we're going to return to the palette knife and let's mix this one here. And let's remember that the palette is definitely going to be the star of today's episode. So that color, I don't want to color match per se, but I do want to relate colors to one another. So I still have the color of the background here, and I'm going to need something a little bit darker. So let's mix it over here. See how much darker the alizarin permanent, alizarin crimson permanent, is on its own. So that on its own will actually darken quite a bit, but we want a little darker, right? So the ultramarine blue, that went way too far. So again, now to Peryline Red. Peryline Red is a nice in-between, between the Cadmium Red and the Alizarin Crimson Permanent, but it still keeps the intensity of the pigment, so it's a really nice and intense red. And I think this ought to do it. I'm just going to use the same brush that I had with that, just because I know that the colors will mix well together. And so with the Alizarin, with the Neo-McGilp medium, again, the medium that I'm using is a fast dryer, and oh, that's a nice color. It's a fast dryer, and it also, what it does is it helps to increase the fluidity of the oil paint. I'm just kind of going in a circular motion, just applying the brush stroke in whichever way I want. I think, I want it to be a little darker, so ultramarine blue right into that mixture there. And we're going to be working through transparencies, especially in the background. It's just kind of a classical way to approach it, to make the background and the shadows a little more transparent. And who knows, this may even be the final coat that I'll put in the background. Certainly won't be the final one, I don't think, for the face. So with more ultramarine blue, we're going all down towards here. And again, this is something that I normally would probably just like cut out, make it happen really quickly. But I'm trying to show you the palette mixing and everything. So let's go ahead and mix the ultramarine blue, alizarin, pearline red, cadmium red medium, ivory black, just to combat the heat. And there you go. Trying to cover all the way up towards the edges. I haven't decided what I want to do yet with that. I don't know, that fabric that's hanging off. Do I want to put that in or take it out? I don't know. So the a little bit more alizarin, ultramarine blue, dioxazine purple now, just because why not? So now we'll put that dark red down here. And it's actually going to get even darker down here, even though you can't see it in the photo reference, just because things are just fading away into the background. And that's it. It would be getting darker. So now that we're here in this shot, I'm pretty sure you can see the palette here. So I'm going to use the Neo-McGilp, ivory black, Peryline red, a little more Peryline red. Don't want to use too much, so I'm kind of running out of that color. So let's put in this dark shape now for the chair. And it's interesting, in paintings you don't actually have to make something so literal. Like, you don't have to know that this is a chair that she's sitting on. I mean, we know it's a chair, but it's interesting how at a distance these kind of abstract shapes read pretty well. So just a simple little shape for that, and if we want to edit it later, we certainly can. So now let's go ahead and return to the palette knife shots and try to get the value we want for the shirt. Alright, so how about we go in with Dioxazine purple first. Dioxazine purple, cadmium red. Let's create a very interesting dark shape. Cobalt teal, just to raise the value a little bit. And this on its own is going to be actually very, very bright, almost too bright. So I'm going to combat that with the green. So now the sap green will help to combat the red that we put in there. Ivory black, just, to bring down the intensity. Again, I'm going to cycle through these colors again. The cadmium red, what did I use before? Dioxazine purple. So the dioxazine purple, cadmium red, and then a little bit of the sap green, just to help to combat the intensity of these colors. And I think I'm going to use the same brush. I'm just going to clean it off. And remember, we just clean off the brushes with the odorless mineral spirits and the paper towel. Being very cautious not to knock the mineral spirits over. That would not be good. Let's move this marker away. And I think that should be about good for now. So with some Neo McGilp. And again, you don't really need the photo reference for this, so it's most likely not in the corner of your screen. There we go. It's a nice dark shape. And so what I want is to be able to cover the shapes that I'm going to eventually continue to build onto. Now, the comments have made it pretty clear that you don't want the, the holes, and that's okay. I can leave them out. And one thing to note is that the color is a little bit light, probably a little bit too light, but I think it's safer to air a little bit lighter. I don't know, but we'll just throw in a little more dark. So ultramarine. So you should be able to see the color mixing here. So ultramarine into that on its own. And let's just use it to put in some of these darks. Super simple. I've kind of been like spinning the brush around lately in this kind of fashion. It's just fun to mix paint on the canvas, a little more ultramarine. We're pushing the dark on this side just so that we push the illusion of form. You know, even if it's not that evident, Dioxazine purple, even if it's not that evident in the photo reference, that photo reference, the reason I'm not showing you it is because it's useless almost for the clothing or for the figure. It's distorting everything. It shouldn't be something that we're going to heavily rely on, especially for this. So now we're going to move the elbow down a little bit and just throwing in a little bit of the Dioxazine Ultramarine. I'm going to have to put in some more medium soon. The elbow goes all the way down here, also known as the olecranon, I think. So again, in a very kind of, I don't know, a spherical kind of motion, I'm putting in these values. And we really want to think of Diego Velázquez with the way we simplify the shapes. Velázquez was excellent when it comes to simplification of shape. You can see how his paintings are just very simple brush strokes when you get close, and then when you get further back, which is why I have you at a further distance right now, everything just starts to like fit in together. A little bit of a dark shape here for the chest. Let's make sure these distances work. Top of the head to the chin, roughly the chest. Yep, we're good. So, okay. And again, we don't need the photo reference for this. Notice how I just did that little measurement there. And that's about it. You don't need to rely on that photo reference. Moving this down. The elbow on this side, and I want to relate this angle to this angle, and I know I don't have the photo reference there right now, but I'll insert it now so you can see this angle. Alright, so now hopefully the photo reference has returned. So you're going to look at this angle with respect to this angle. It's fairly useful in the photo reference, so we're going to use it. So this angle to this angle, I think it's good. I think we're in a good spot. So more Dioxazine and Ultramarine. And here's where I'm definitely going to want to push color. So again, I think that it all depends on your style and your taste in painting. But lately, I'm trying to push my contrast in color, not just the contrast in value, but contrast in color as well. I want to have a much more of a variety of color in my paintings as opposed to the usual like kind of thing. I don't want it to just seem like I always used a limited palette. I want to explore the richness and the intensity of, you know, like a more complex palette. Even if you don't necessarily need all those colors, which you don't need all those colors to paint flesh tones. And you can paint very, very convincing images with just like 4 colors. But we've done that enough, I think. I think now it's really time to, you know, start to explore the endless possibilities with these colors. So Dioxazine, Ultramarine. I'm going to keep pushing this shadow here. That's the side plane of the rib cage turning in. And I think you corrected me. Thank you for mentioning the xiphoid process down there. But we use the anatomy to help place things. Don't need it so much here, because we placed everything where we wanted it to be before. So I think it's okay now. And now that I have the softness, I'm going to again just continue to push the darks. So Dioxazine Purple, Ultramarine, Ivory Black. Pretty much ran out of my medium. It'll be fine. And we want to push this dark here. See? We want to make sure that we don't lose the sensibility of shadow. We don't want to lose light and shadow. Even if it's lost in the photograph, we don't want to lose it in the painting. Again, we're not copying the painting. I'm getting tired. We're not copying the photo reference. Pushing that dark there. Probably should push it over here too. And again, we're just going to imagine like the holes aren't there, so there would be some form here. And then the pectoral would get a little bit darker over here as it turns into the deltoid over here. Spinning the brush around every which way. Alright, so how about we return to the palette, or the palette knife mixtures for the jean colors now. Remember, the palette is the star of today's episode. So let's start with what's most obvious. Ivory Black. Titanium White. It will give us a nice gray for the jeans. But of course, I'm not going to make it just gray. I'm going to throw in some color, right? So let's put in the Ultramarine and the Cobalt Teal. More Cobalt Teal. Now I don't want it to be just a generic blue. I want it to have a tint, maybe a little bit of a purplish tint. So instead of going right for the Dioxazine, I'll go for the Peryline Red. And oh my goodness, I've used up a lot of Peryline Red. Okay, so more of the Peryline Red till we get a nice blue jean color. Cobalt Teal. Back to the Peryline Red. And this ought to do. But we're also going to want a darker color for the jeans. I just know this automatically. So Ivory Black, Ultramarine Blue. My palette knife is sharp. So sometimes I'll actually rub or like kind of scrape the side of the palette knife on a piece of wood or something, just to dull it down, because these things do get sharp. Gotta watch out with the palette knife. A little bit of burnt umber just because. Okay, so now what we gotta do is clean out that brush once again. So just the odorless mineral spirits. And you know what? I'm not gonna clean this brush completely. Just a little bit. I'm actually gonna use another one. So let's use a different brush this time. Same thing, just odorless mineral spirits. Using the rim of the this container here to kind of shake off some of the paint. And I think this ought to be clean enough now. Alright, so with a little more of the Neo McGilt medium, I did just add a little bit more. Let's test out this blue jean color. That's pretty good, I think. So let's go ahead and now push the shape and add a little more specificity to the shape while we're at it. And I tell you what, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to need a light brush and a dark brush. So that's why I didn't fully clean this brush off. So let's see what it looks like without doing anything to it. So it's already pretty dark. So let's add the dark value that we mixed up. See that? And we're going to be very strategic about our brush strokes because we don't want to spend a long time painting jeans. So nothing wrong with jeans, it's just I don't want to spend a long time painting jeans. So let's go ahead and use a little bit of a, let's see, this is going to be just between you and me, okay? So I'm going to mix up a dark plane that I'm going to work over top of in order to kind of to blend and get a more specific shape. But this is only between you and me. So let's go ahead and cover all down here. And now you'll see what I'm talking about. So now that's going to be the light for the jeans. And this is where it's going to help to blend these shapes together. See how I'm just spinning the brush, and automatically we're going to have this tone. That just saved us so much time with the blend or the mixing each individual shape. But this just stays between you and me, okay? So let's go ahead and put this dark shape over here, and we're going to paint the pocket in just by painting and blending right onto the jean. And it gets darker automatically just because some of the paint that was there already in this darker patch is just mixing. And I don't want to put in too much detail for the jeans. I'll probably come back in the second color pass, and then I'll start to add in all the little details. But I just want to get those large masses covered. So again, gonna just kind of blend in here. And then just between you and me, okay? We're going to start to put in the light shape, and we're going to let these shapes blend. Will save us a lot of time with having to mix each individual value one by one. See that? And very quickly now we have the effect of jeans. Pushing this up and over. There we go. Very simple now. And now we're going to mix up a flesh tone with the palette knife or the hand. So we're going to start off in with a very strange combination here. So we're going to use the cadmium orange. So just cadmium orange and cadmium green, cadmium orange, cadmium green, cadmium red, cadmium everything basically. Flake white along with whatever was already in the flake white, just to kind of help to neutralize this color, because it is going to come out being too bright if I use it as it is. Here's a very interesting thing about mixing with palette knife. You can easily clean it, and then you can get a much richer color like this. So now what I want is to gray it down, so I'll just use a little bit of this. So a little bit of the jeans, the color of the, whoa. Okay, so that was too much. Take some of it off. Leave that little bit. And there you go. See what kind of advantages you can have with mixing with the palette knife. Helps you to get a very rich color. So Peryline Red. And now we're going to go towards that pinkish route. This is going to be a very unconventional flesh tone. Cobalt Teal. A little bit more of the red. And I did let some of this mix in with this color, and it's okay. Titanium white with whatever was just on there. Now we're talking. Just added way too much titanium white. So Peryline Red. Yellow ochre. Now we're starting to get the flesh tone. But I don't want it to be too light, so... Uh-oh, are we going to do it? A little bit of dioxazine purple. Too much, too much, too much. Only want a little bit of dioxazine purple. See how it adds a very interesting nuance to the flesh tone. And there you go, that's how you mix up a flesh tone with a lot of very unconventional colors. Now let's get a different brush. I've already cleaned this brush off, so I'm going to apply it to the brush and a little more Neo McGilt medium. And now I am in no way, shape, or form going to try to finish these hands in one layer. So what I'm going to do is keep it abstract, just like we did before, but now it's going to be abstract shapes rather than just value alone. It's going to be abstract shapes of color as well. And then we'll be able to build the more complex shapes on top of these. I think that the light sensitivity needs to drop. Maybe that's too much. Yeah, so my bad. I needed to drop the light sensitivity. You know, I think that this needs a little more pink. So off camera here, a little bit of Alizarin Crimson Permanent and just that, and there you go. Variation in the flesh tones is a good thing. And we'll be able to add more specificity onto these shapes after it dries. And the reason I want to leave it like abstract like this is simply because I struggle with hands, and it's important to know what your strengths and your weaknesses are. And I think I want to rather play it safe with the hands and keep a very simple shape. And you'll be able to see in a distance that it'll still read at least somewhat like hands. And let's go farther back so you can see what I'm talking about. Now here we are really, really far back. And you can see that the little mittens that we painted in there does look like hands. When you glance at a distance, your mind, the mind kind of just fills that in. Like it sees the face, sorry, autofocus. It sees the face, and then it sees the background, sees the figure, and then hands. It just, that's the way it works. And now we're going to mix up a kind of a gray, neutral green. So somewhere in between the sap green and the cadmium green, but with more intensity. So let's experiment with color, okay? So this is about color experimentation. So so the cadmium green, the dioxazine purple, what's going to happen with that? Let's move that over here. So actually, I don't even know what this color is going to look like. It's kind of brown, but it's kind of like a bright brown, if that's even possible. So what I want is just a neutral green, but this is interesting. It's like a greenish bright brown. And let's just apply this shape with the palette knife. So it needs to be dark. And this way we're going to get a very nice and flat color. But the value, I think, is a little bit off. And so we're going to add more of the dioxazine purple, less of the cadmium green. Let's experiment some more. So how about we add a little bit of the, not cobalt teal, it's too light. Let's put in the alizarin, though we know what's going to happen now. It's It's going to get really dark, really red. So the alizarin and now the cobalt teal, just to keep us on our toes here. There we go. That's the color that we needed. Or should I say the value? So at this point, I'm just applying it with the palette knife, just because I want like some variety in the painting, in the texture of the painting, that is. Where some areas are going to be very thin, other areas are going to be kind of caked on. So this one's definitely going to be one of those that are kind of caked on. And it's okay if the background starts to influence the color. It's actually going to work to our advantage. And whatever this thing may be, it may be a couch or it may be whatever, this is going to be a good way to start off the shape with just a mass. And remember, I think of mass and shape as kind of the same thing, because you know, you can start off with a mass just like this and then sculpt out a shape, a more specific shape. And what I mean, I should have said that more properly. The relationship between mass and line, in my opinion, they do the same thing. A mass is just working from the inside out, and a shape or an outline is just working from the outside in. Speaking of outlines, I did just mess that up. So I'm going to use a brush that already had this value. Just kind of merge those shapes together and soften the edge while we're at it. So that's actually going to help with the softening of the shape. While we have this brush out, let's just put in this dark once and for all for the chair. So a little bit of the color for the, let's move the camera down. So a little bit of the color that we used in the jeans, we're going to use in this. We're going to use the background color just to fill this in. And again, this is going to be a nice contrast to the more realistic stuff that we're going to have in the painting later on. Dioxazine purple. Just to sneak in some warmth into those shapes. And then let's just go ahead and let the paint do its thing and automatically soften out the edges for us, creating the kind of the effect of a fabric. Just soften these edges. Even though the paint is painted on there really thick, we can still have soft edges. So let's just soften it off with the fan brush. And I don't want this portion or this episode to get too long. The previous ones, I'm pretty sure, have been very long already. So we're definitely going to let this one be a much shorter episode. I'm going to just come back in with that background color. Again, just softening this edge. And that's going to conclude today's episode. Again, it was really fun to explore different color combinations that we could make with the palette knife. That being said, I really hope that today's episode helps you out. I wish you the best in all of your artwork. And as always, I'll be back again with the next episode tomorrow. And of course, what you're seeing here is the collector's gallery. So again, my girlfriend Lucy and I, we are working on on a Patreon. So we're working on a Patreon account where you will be able to support these episodes. You will be able to support the daily painting show, the Daily Yupari. So what we have here again is a collection, just a small portion, a small fragment of the collection of all of the oil paintings created in this painting show. and off camera as well. So once the Patreon is up and running, you will actually have a chance to own one of these paintings. There will also be other things I'll be offering in the Patreon that I won't be able to offer using the YouTube platform. That being said, I really hope that today's episode helps you out. I'll be back again with another episode tomorrow. And I almost forgot, since I'm going to let the painting dry now, we got to clean off the palette, right? So you're wondering, how do you clean an oil painting palette? So this is how you do it. Palette knife, just scrape off the area that you want to clean. In this case, I'm going to leave these paints on here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stick this palette in the freezer. But one thing I do want to clean off is the mixing space, and what I do is I just combine all of this paint. So remember, combining all this paint together, I can actually tone some canvases in the future. And I'll just put this thing of paint off to the side on a piece of glass or something, and again stick that in the freezer. The next thing you want to do is get a rag or just a cloth. Put your odorless mineral spirits in there. You don't need that much. And just wipe the areas that you want to clean. And in this case, I do want to clean as much as I can. I don't want to sacrifice too much of the paint, but I am going to create a little bit of a strand of paint here. So I'm going to go ahead and take these off and put them off to the side. So I took those pieces of paint off, well, the piece of paint and the medium. And I don't think you want to let the medium dry on your palette that much, but yeah. So I'm going to just clean all around. And the next thing, actually, I almost forgot, I'm going to take off the titanium white and the flake white. And I'm going to do that just with the palette knife. I'm going to figure out where I want to put it. So I'm just going to put it on a separate piece of glass. And you want to be very careful with how you let the paint dry, if you are going to let the paint dry on your palette. I actually, for the longest time, I didn't let any paint dry on this palette, but now I'm pretty happy with this color layout. And I tend to think of palettes as another form of art. So I think it's important to let the palette dry in such a way that you will enjoy it aesthetically. Just creating a little sharp edge there. And that's it.